Chapter 6 in The Treasure of Pelican Cove, Dark Shadows. That afternoon, Elizabeth Ann went down to the kitchen to help Granny bake. Hiram had work to do, and Paul wanted to help him. Jimmy went up to his room to play. After a while, the billowing curtains drew him to the window. He leaned on the windowsill and rested his head on his arms. He watched the waves roll towards the shore and crash onto the sand. The foam fanned out like the sand onto the sand like white lace. It spilled over into the holes in the sand. The foam slipped away and left small pools of water. Blackie trotted down from the house. He stopped to sniff at one of the pools. He barked sharply, backed up, and shook his head. Jimmy laughed. He leaned farther out the window. "Gotcha, Blackie," he yelled. "What was it? A crab?" Blackie looked up at the window and barked again. He trotted back and forth, whimpering. "I'm coming," Jimmy called. He went across the bed in one stride. Halfway down the stairs, he remembered that the beach was off limits. He headed for the kitchen. Granny and Elizabeth Ann were baking cookies. Jimmy took one and stuffed it into his mouth. "Good," he mumbled, and turned back for two more. "That's all, son," Granny said. "Supper will come soon enough." "Blackie's out on the beach, Granny," Jimmy said. "May I go get him?" "Don't talk with your mouth full, Jimmy," Elizabeth Ann said. Granny brushed back a stray strand of hair. She tucked it back into the neat braids that wound around her head. "I think that would be fine, Jimmy," she said. "The beach isn't closed for regular use, just digging. Go play with Blackie." Jimmy was gone before she finished. He half ran, half slid down the path to the beach. Blackie met him at the bottom. Jimmy followed him back to the hole. He lay down and probed in the water. The crab scuttled up one side of the hole. It walked sideways across the sand, chased by the barking dog. Jimmy let the water settle and looked again. A starfish clung to a rock in the bottom. Jimmy pulled it out of a tangle of seaweed and let it crawl along his arm. Its suckers felt clammy on his skin. He let the starfish drop off into the water. "I'll bet these holes are full of stuff," Jimmy said eagerly. "Let's check them out, Blackie." He was at the third hole when Blackie began to whine. He trotted away from the hole to stand between Jimmy and the sand dunes. "What's the matter, Blackie?" Jimmy asked. He looked toward the dunes. A shadow swept across one dune. Jimmy frowned. He glanced up in the sky, but no bird circled overhead. "Is anyone there?" Jimmy called. There was no answer. Suddenly, Blackie began to bark furiously. Jimmy grabbed for the dog. He shivered. "Let's go back home," he said. Blackie didn't protest. He trotted beside Jimmy, wagging his tail. When they reached the house, Blackie lay down on the porch. Jimmy went inside to find the others. He told Granny about the shadow. "There was somebody watching me," he said. "I just know there was." I've lived on this island all my life, Granny said slowly. I know every man, woman, and child by name. No one here would hurt you. Elizabeth Ann put down her bowl. Everything has changed, Gran, she said. Hunting for treasure isn't fun anymore. Do you want to give it up? Granny asked. Not yet, Elizabeth Ann admitted. But I wish everything was back the way it used to be. Perhaps it will be, Granny said. We'll get some things straightened out at the meeting tonight. But the meeting didn't turn out the way Granny had expected. Miss Abbott was on the town council. So were Colin Ludlow, Ramon Corres, and Tom Hadmore. Every one of them had been digging on the beach. The speeches were long and loud. In the end, the council voted to divide the beach up into sections and to allow only hand digging. Granny stood up when the markers were passed around for drawing lots. I'll have none of this, she said. Hiram, you could stay if you want, but I'm taking the children home. I'm with you, Hiram said. Granddad's treasure is beginning to have a bitter taste. Jimmy looked at Hiram. Like a drink all shook up and gone flat, he said. Hiram gave him a surprised look. Right, Jimmy, he said, just like that. That night, during devotions, Granny read the story from the Bible that told about Rachel's taking her father's household idols. Jimmy listened hard to what Granny was saying about greed, but he didn't understand what Rachel's idols had to do with what was happening on the beach. The next morning, they sat on the porch and watched the council members divide the beach into sections. Each section had a number. People lined the road along the beach. They were burdened down with all kinds of digging tools. They carried water jugs and umbrellas, and each person held a numbered card that would match a numbered lot. Looks just like a gold field, Hiram said. Watch, now you're about to see a gold rush. When the signal was given, the people poured over the dunes, each one heading for the section that matched his number. In a matter of minutes, sand was flying into the air. Jimmy stared. Paul stalked back and forth. Elizabeth Ann moaned. Oh, I wish Jimmy had never found that jewel. They're going to ruin our summer. Maybe not, Hiram said slowly. A chuckle began deep in his throat. They were clearing those sections mighty fast. Look at Nat McDougal. Use that shovel. I never thought I would ever see that man work so hard. Granny smiled. It does look like good exercise, she said. They'll all get some profit from this. From it, after the sore muscles, that is. The muscles were sore by late afternoon. The sections had been mostly cleared too. Tired, discouraged people headed back up the sand dunes. Only a few remained to argue. If you had let me use my dozer, we'd have found something, Jake insisted. The vacated holes attracted Blackie. The dog trotted down the path. He was nosing around Jake's section when one of Jake's workers saw him. Get that dog out of here," he shouted. He ran towards Blackie, waving a shovel. Jimmy launched himself off the porch. He headed down to Jake's section, screeching, "Don't touch my dog!" Hiram and Paul were right behind him. "Jimmy!" they yelled. They caught up with him at the hole. Jake had dug. Jimmy was holding Blackie by the collar and glaring up at Jake and the man who held the shovel. The man had a tanned face and stringy-looking dark hair. "Go on, kid," Jake said gruffly. "We won't hurt your dog." "Hey, aren't you the kid that found the emerald?" the man with the shovel asked. His small, dark eyes gleamed. Jimmy didn't answer. He backed away, still holding Blackie. "Then that's the dog that brought it to you," Jake said thoughtfully. "Maybe we've been going about this all wrong. Maybe we need that dog. He'd lead us right to the treasure." "No, you don't," Jimmy said. His chin jutted out. "I'm taking Blackie home." Jake pulled out a roll of money. "Here, kid," he said, peeling off $20 bills. "I'll buy that dog." "No way," Jimmy said. His chin jutted out even farther. "Blackie's not for sale."